November 24th, 1991. The call came at 7 in the evening. John Deacon was at home in Surrey when he found out that Freddie Mercury was gone. He did not go to Garden Lodge that night. He stayed where he was, and at some point in the hours after the call, in the specific silence of a house in Surrey, on a Sunday evening in November, with the news still arriving in waves and nowhere to put it, John Deacon sat down and wrote something, not a public statement, not a press release, something private, a note, nobody knows what it said. Brian May has never described it. Roger Taylor has never mentioned it. The people closest to John Deacon in the years that followed have never referenced it. And John Deacon himself, who has not given an interview since 1997, who does not speak to Brian May or Roger Taylor directly, who communicates with the band's management through an accountant, has never said a word about it publicly. The note exists in this story the way John Deacon exists in the Queen story. Present, essential, and almost entirely silent. This is what we know about the man who wrote it, and this is what the silence around it has cost everyone who loved the same person he loved. John Deacon joined Queen in 1971. He was the last member to join, and by every account, the quietest. Where Freddie Mercury performed everything, his joy, his grief, his fury, John Deacon absorbed everything and showed almost nothing, the still point of the band. The one who listened more than he spoke, Brian May, has described him as deceptively quiet. Roger Taylor has said, John always knew more than he let on. Freddie Mercury loved John Deacon with a specific and particular warmth. The two of them were opposites in every visible way. Freddie, theatrical, expansive, unable to stop performing even in private. John, contained, precise, the musician who did the work and went home. And yet the people who watched them together have described a specific ease, the ease of two people who understood each other completely and did not need to perform the understanding. John Deacon knew about the diagnosis before it was announced. Freddie Mercury sat the band down at his home and told them. He said, "You probably know what I'm going to say," he said. "I don't want to talk about it anymore." He said, "I just want to make music to the day I die." And John Deacon heard this. He absorbed it in the way he absorbed everything, without performance, without visible collapse. With the specific quiet of someone who has just received information they have been half expecting, and who has decided to carry it exactly as Freddie asked. They made innuendo. They made Made in Heaven. John Deacon played on every session he could make. He was there in Montreux. He was there in the London studios. He was, by every account from the people present during those final recording years, the member of the band who showed up most consistently and asked the fewest questions about what was happening. He played the bass. He did the work. He let Freddie lead. And when Freddie died in November 1991, John Deacon lost not only his bandmate and his collaborator, but the person who had taken him under his wing when he was 20 years old and shown him what it was to be in Queen. He lost the person who had made him belong. He lost the person who had made him belong. The note was written in this context, not the context of a press release, not the context of a musician preparing a public statement about the death of a famous colleague. The context of a man sitting in a house in Surrey at night after the worst phone call of his life, with nowhere to put what he was feeling, writing something down, because writing it down was the only thing available. What he wrote, unknown. Who he wrote it to, unknown. Whether it was addressed to anyone, to Freddie, to himself, to no one, unknown. Whether Brian May found it in 1991, or years later, or decades later, or whether the finding was accidental or deliberate. Unknown what Brian May did with it when he found it. Unknown what Brian May said about it, in private, to the people closest to him, not recorded. The note exists in the Queen archive the way the most important things in the Queen archive exist, as an absence, as the thing that was there and that nobody has described. As the space where the most private part of the story lives. The Freddie Mercury tribute concert was held at Wembley Stadium on April 20th, 1992. John Deacon was there. He played. He stood on the stage where he had stood with Freddie Mercury in 1985 and 1986, and he played every note. George Michael sang Somebody to Love. Elton John sang These Are the Days of Our Lives. David Bowie knelt on the stage and recited the Lord's Prayer. And John Deacon played bass through all of it. He played well. He was present. And then, in 1997, he played one final time the Paris show, the recording of No One But You, the last public appearance with Brian May and Roger Taylor. And at some point during that final appearance, John Deacon looked at his two remaining bandmates and said 4 words. I can't do this anymore. Brian May has said they thought he needed a break. As it turned out, he never came back. He went home to Surrey. He has been there since. He plays golf. He walks his dog. He does not give interviews. He does not perform. He does not speak to Brian May or Roger Taylor directly. He communicates with the band's business through an accountant. He signed a vinyl record for Freddie Mercury's birthday auction in 2025, the first Queen-related public gesture in nearly 30 years. And that is all. Brian May has spent 30 years carrying Freddie Mercury. Freddie appears in his dreams. He and Roger Taylor often feel Freddie is in the corner of the room. This is grief that has not resolved carried so long, it has become part of the structure of the person carrying it. And at some point in the years after November 1991, in the clearing out of studios, in the archiving of decades of material, Brian May found the note. How it came to be in his possession. Not known. Whether John Deacon left it intentionally. Not known. What Brian May did, when he understood what he was holding, he has never said. He has spoken about John Deacon with the specific care of someone protecting a person who is asked to be protected. We have to respect the fact that John needs his privacy. He has said nothing about the note. Nobody knows what John Deacon wrote the night Freddie Mercury died. This is not a mystery that will be solved. Whatever he wrote belongs to him, but the shape of the man who wrote it is available. In Brian May's accounts, sensitive to stress, more affected than he showed, the member for whom losing Freddie was not a professional disruption, but a personal collapse. In the account of Jackie Smith, a Queen confidante, John just gave up after Freddie died. Freddie took him under his wing, and they were very close for all those years. Freddie drew the attention, so John didn't have to. And when the person who drew the attention was gone, John Deacon had nowhere to be. The note was written by this person. In this condition. On this night. Whatever it said, it was true. Whatever it said, it was true. And Brian May, who found it in whatever year, in whatever context, in whatever state of his own ongoing grief, read it. He read the handwriting of the person who had been the quiet center of Queen for 20 years, who had played on every album, who had written Another One Bites the Dust and I Want to Break Free, and who had never, in 2 decades of being asked about them, described what he was thinking when he wrote them. He read what John Deacon had written the night Freddie Mercury died, and he has never said what it contained. Not in the interviews he has given every year since 1991. Not in the documentaries. Not in the books. Not in the social media posts. Not to journalists. Not on camera. The note is there. In the silence between everything Brian May has said about John Deacon, in the specific care he takes every time the subject comes up, we have to respect the fact that John needs his privacy. This sentence has been said many times. It is the sentence of someone who is protecting something specific. The note is part of what it protects. John Deacon's silence has cost the Queen's story something that cannot be recovered. He is the only surviving member who was present for the whole arc from the beginning in 1971, when 4 young men made a band that nobody expected to last. through the Live Aid afternoon, through the innuendo sessions, through the final recording of the final vocal. He was there. He saw it from the closest possible position. He played on every note of it, and he will not speak about it. He has decided with the specific and permanent decisiveness of someone who has considered the decision carefully that what he knows belongs to him. Brian May and Roger Taylor have shared their version of the story across hundreds of hours of interviews. John Deacon's version does not exist in the public record. What Freddie Mercury was like in the moments between performances. What the band was like in the room when they were not performing for anyone. What John Deacon thought in November 1991 about the specific person who had taken him under his wing and made him feel he belonged. Dying at 45 in a house in Kensington with the curtains open so he could see the garden. The note is the only record of what John Deacon thought, and the note has never been read aloud. In 2025, John Deacon signed a copy of A Night at the Opera. He signed it for a silent auction supporting Freddie Mercury's official birthday celebration. The announcement from Queen Online described it as the first time Deacon had publicly contributed to a Queen-related event in nearly 30 years. The signed album was the centerpiece of the auction. It raised money for HIV/AIDS awareness, the cause that Freddie Mercury's death had given permanent urgency. The cause that the tribute concert in 1992 had dedicated itself to. John Deacon signed a record. He did not attend the event. He did not give an interview. He did not make a statement. He signed the record and sent it, through whatever channel connects him, to the world he left in 1997. And that was all. Brian May responded to the announcement with the specific warmth of someone who had been waiting a long time for any gesture. The gesture was small. Its meaning was not small. John Deacon, who has not spoken publicly in nearly 30 years, who does not call Brian May, who communicates through an accountant, John Deacon, picked up a pen. He signed his name to something that was entirely about Freddie. He put the pen down. He sent it. He put the pen down. He sent it. This is the only John Deacon gesture available in 30 years. One signature. On a record made with Freddie Mercury. For an auction raising money for the disease that killed Freddie Mercury. At the birthday celebration of the person John Deacon has not spoken about publicly in 3 decades. The signature says everything the note might have said. Not in words. In the choice to put pen to paper at all. In the choice of which event to do it for. In the choice of which record to sign. John Deacon, who gave up music after Freddie died, who said I can't do this anymore, and walked off a stage in Paris in 1997, and has not walked onto one since John Deacon signed A Night at the Opera. The album that contains Bohemian Rhapsody. The album from 1975. The album that Brian May has said represents the moment Queen became what they were always supposed to be. He signed it for Freddie's birthday. He did not say why. He did not need to. Brian May and John Deacon do not speak. He has said so. We don't speak, which is a shame. But we do know that we have his blessing. Business decisions communicate through management. Through an accountant. The two men who stood on the same stage, who were in the same studio for the final vocals, they do not call each other. Whatever connects them now is administrative. Brian May has accepted this with the grace of someone who understands that grief does not produce the same result in everyone. John Deacon's grief produced silence. Brian May's grief produced continuation. Neither of them is wrong. And the note sitting somewhere between them in the 30 years since it was written is the record of the moment before the paths diverged. The Queen archive is enormous. 50 years of recordings, session tapes, photographs, correspondence, and somewhere in a private collection, in a drawer in Surrey, or in a house wherever Brian May keeps the things that belong to the most private part of his life, The note exists. A piece of paper with John Deacon's handwriting on it. Written on the night of November 24th, 1991. What it said, still unknown. Whether it will ever be known, almost certainly not. John Deacon is not going to give an interview. He is not going to write a memoir. He is going to continue living the life he chose in 1997. And the note will stay where it is. Private, specific, his. Private, specific, his. And this is the specific quality of John Deacon's relationship with everything that happened in Queen, the specific quality that makes him the most interesting person in the story, and the one the story knows least about. Brian May has given the words. Roger Taylor has given the rhythm. Freddie Mercury gave everything. John Deacon has given the silence. And the silence, which has lasted 30 years and which shows no sign of ending, is itself a kind of answer to the question of what was in the note. Because a person who had something ordinary to say would have said it. A person who had something manageable to say would have found a way to manage it. John Deacon has said nothing for 30 years because what he has to say is not ordinary and not manageable and not something that can be given to a journalist or a documentary maker or a microphone. What he wrote the night Freddie Mercury died is the same thing he has been not saying for 30 years. The note is not a mystery. It is simply the written form of the silence, the first sentence of 30 years of not speaking. November 24th, 1991. John Deacon was in Surrey. The call came. Freddie was gone. And at some point in the hours that followed, John Deacon sat down. He wrote something. Nobody knows what. He wrote it. He put it somewhere. Brian May found it. Years later. Decades later. Whenever. He read it. He has never said what it contained. John Deacon has not spoken publicly since 1997. He does not call Brian May. He communicates through an accountant. In 2025, he signed a record. A night at the opera. For Freddie's birthday. He signed it and sent it and said nothing. One signature. 30 years of silence. One note written on the worst night of his life. Still unread by the world. Still his. The most private person in the most public band in the history of British rock music sat down on the night his world ended and wrote something true. And the truth stayed where he put it. With him. Where it belongs.